Y'all, why would somebody who has training as a music attorney, somebody who knows how the sausage is made, want to get into the music business and make a record? I just had to know. So in episode 213 of Heavy Metal Philosophy, I spoke to Sofia from Exiled Hope and asked her that question. Hey, you know what this industry is about. Why would you want to get into this? She gave me a good answer, and as we were talking about her new record and the storytelling aspect, the hero's journey, of course, y'all know me, free will versus determinism came up, and sort of an interesting concept come up there. Well, let's close with a little bit of philosophy. I touched on it earlier, and you know, this is a reoccurring theme here because personally I'm just obsessed, but the whole free will and determinism thing. You kind of have to have some kind of free will to be a hero, right?
Yeah.
And is it possible to be a hero if you don't have free will? Isn't the most fundamental part of being a hero making the choice to do the hard thing, the self-sacrifice in order to accomplish the heroic thing? And vice versa. The villain in the story, if the villain doesn't have any free will, then that means that they didn't choose their villainous ways and it's not really their fault. Or can they overcome the circumstances of their birth, their trust fund, their responsibilities, their leadership, that sort of thing? Very cool discussion with Sofia. Let's not waste any more time. Here is Exiled Hope. Sofia from Exiled Hope, welcome to Heavy Metal Philosophy.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Now, I want to talk about your new record, Apocrypha, but before we get into that, I have something that I'm super curious about. So you're currently in law school to, I assume, practice law in the music industry.
Yes, I am.
So you're deep in it. And you've sort of seen the machine and how the sausage is made.
Yep.
And yet here you are still putting yourself out there as an artist. So I'm curious about your point of view from that direction, because you know it's a dirty business, but we still want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, my point of view on this is that knowledge is power, and the more you know about the industry, the more you can work around it, work through it, make it work for you. And if you have a music lawyer on your side, I mean, a competent music lawyer who is experienced in the industry, who knows what they're doing, and not just your uncle who does traffic stops or DUIs, things like that. You need someone who on your team who has a deep understanding of the industry and who can navigate it with you and be your advocate. So that's what I want to be for other musicians, and that's kind of what I went to law school to be for myself. So it all kind of dovetails together in that way.
Very good. Well, let's get to the music. Tell me about the world of Exiled Hope, because I've listened to 2 records now, and it's a story. Both of them were storytelling albums. So tell me about the world of Exiled Hope.
Absolutely. So Exiled Hope is I would call it a dystopian fantasy story. It's set in this medieval / steampunk combined world that I've created. It's set in this, mostly in the city of Greytown, which is run by this corrupt government that's keeping all these secrets from its citizens and trying to control them. And Hope in the first album discovers everything that they're doing, and she tells everyone and starts a rebellion. And of course, they don't like that. So they come after her. She becomes an outlaw, becomes a folk hero. She's eventually killed at the end of the album, and she's sent to the underworld, which is where Realm of the Exiled, my latest EP, picks up. So Realm of the Exiled follows her journey through the underworld and the way that she fights through her personal demons and the literal demons around her and finds her way back to the world of mortals, back to her city. But of course, she's been gone for a very long time and things have changed, and she has to find her place in that world again, potentially a world that doesn't really exist the way that she knew it when she was killed. So she has to come back and find her place in the world again. And Apocrypha actually takes place during all that, but in the mortal world. And it's from the perspective of a member of the corrupt city government. And he's going through this personal crisis of faith, in a sense, in that he's questioning what he's been told and what he thinks he knows about the world that he's been born into, about the path that he's been put on. And he's trying to figure out what that means for him and whether he can use his power for good or if he's just doomed to follow this predestined path that everyone around him has set out for him.
You said predestined, and now all the heavy metal philosophy regulars are going to go, okay, here he goes. So let's go ahead and get it out of the way. Do you believe in free will or determinism?
Oh, I believe in free will. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's kind of what Apocrypha was about. It's about choosing your own path and figuring out who you are, despite what everyone else in the world is trying to tell you who you are.
You kind of have to believe in free will for a heroic story, right?
You do, yeah.
Yeah. So how much time passed while she was in the underworld? Because you said the world had changed a lot while she was gone.
Yeah, I would say perhaps a few hundred years.
Oh, yeah. So a lot has changed.
Yeah, a lot has changed.
And that was Realm of the Exiled, right?
Realm of the Exiled, yes.
And you teamed up with a band called Steel Forge to make that EP.
Yep.
Was that just like you're friends with those guys? Like, hey, this would be fun? Or is it because this story, it would really benefit from what you saw in that band? Or I imagine maybe a combination of both.
It's a little bit of both. So I had been a fan of Steel Forge for a while. I discovered them in 2019 and started following them then. And then they reached out to me in 2022 and they were like, hey, we need a new guitarist. Would you be interested? And I was like, well, thank you for the offer, but I'm in the US across the pond. I'm not in the UK, so that would be very hard. But I'm down to collab with you anytime you want. And I'm down to record studio guitar parts if you need that from me. So this eventually became a collaborative EP. And I think it started as me writing songs for the band while they were searching for a new guitarist. And then we were like, you know what, let's just collaborate on this and make it our own thing. And it was a fun little experimental challenge for me too, because it's very Melodeath influenced. And while I love Melodeath as a genre, there hasn't been much of a place for it in Exiled Hope. I haven't done a whole lot of it in Exiled Hope. So I was trying to blend what I knew of Steel Forge's sound and what I currently do so that we could seamlessly blend our styles and make that work. So on Realm of the Exiled, I'm performing all the guitar, synth, and backing vocal parts and some main vocals here and there. And Steel Forge contributed the vocals, bass, and drums. Yeah.
You did the orchestration, right?
I did, yeah.
It's definitely a different sound. So I just got done listening to that one, and let's peek behind the curtain a little bit. This is being recorded in late January. Apocrypha will be released on April 11th. That's roundabout when most people will hear this. So I've just heard your Steel Forge collaboration, and it's quite different than solo Exiled Hope. The orchestration in particular has a lot of counter melody. It's quite busy, and Apocrypha is more direct. It's still grand. It's still orchestral and big guitar parts, but it's more direct and more vocal centric, I would say.
Yeah, and I would say I leaned a bit heavier on progressive influences for the Steel Forge EP because Steel Forge has more of a progressive sound, more of a epic Melodeath sound, so I wanted to make sure it was consistent with what people could expect from that band, so I did make it a little bit more complex and kind of leaned on different sorts of influences for that. Yeah.
So speaking of where we come from influencing our sound, am I right? Are you from Maryland?
I'm from a lot of places. I was a military kid, so
me too.
So I moved around a lot as a kid. I actually spent the most time in Hawaii when I was a kid. I graduated from high school there. So it's kind of funny thinking about like this black metal influenced sound coming from a tropical place. But yeah, so I spent most of my time in Hawaii, but then I graduated from high school and I went to college in Florida, and Florida course, there's a huge death metal scene. Malevolent Creation is one of my favorite Florida death metal bands. And so yeah, I spent some time in Florida, and now I'm kind of back in the DC adjacent area for law school. So moved around a lot.
What made me want to ask you about that was the shout at the beginning of Blood of Ancients. As a Southerner, it felt familiar to me, but as a metalhead, it was quite novel. I don't really hear a shout like that very often. But now that you mentioned Hawaii, that Maori culture definitely has some unique shouts too. So the moment that started, I was like, oh, that's different.
Yeah, it was actually very, I was thinking of Judas Priest when I did that. I was like, it'd be really fun to do like a Rob Halford sort of painkiller thing at the beginning of that. But yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from now that I think about it. Didn't occur to me at the time, but I hear it now.
Yeah, that was fun. Immediately, eyebrow raised, like, ooh, okay.
Yeah.
So what came first? Did you have this story of Exiled Hope in your mind already? Or were you a musician first and you're like, okay, now I need to write a story?
So I was a musician first. In college, I was in an indie sort of alternative rock band. I was the guitarist for the band, and I had a lot of ideas that didn't really fit within the context of what that band was doing, and I didn't want to like drag everyone down my weird symphonic metal path if they didn't want to. So but I also didn't want to wait for other people to join in the project, and that would slow everything down if I had to wait on other people to get this work done that I wanted to do. So I set out to learn how to do everything myself because I thought, why not? If you want something done right, you kind of got to do it yourself sometimes. So Exiled Hope was kind of, built on the idea of necessity is the mother of invention. So just because I didn't have any other bandmates at the time and I really just wanted to experiment, learn new skills, and get all this done myself, Exiled Hope started out purely as this fun experimental thing that I was doing. And then eventually I was like, I really love concept albums and I really love storytelling. I've always been a storyteller type of person. And so I wanted to weave that into my music. And I felt, what better medium for a concept album than symphonic metal? So I was like, here we go. Exiled Hope is going to be this conceptual symphonic metal project.
Well, let's close with a little bit of philosophy. I touched on it earlier, and this is a reoccurring theme here because personally I'm just obsessed. But the whole free will and determinism thing, you kind of have to have some kind of free will to be a hero, right?
Yeah.
And so let me just tell you where I'm coming from, so that the struggle makes sense to you. I don't really believe in free will too much, and it's actually metal that sort of leaned me in that direction. When I realized that I didn't choose to be a metalhead, the moment that I heard it, I didn't go, okay, now I'm going to. It just was instantaneous, like a switch flipped, and I cannot turn it off. It is switched permanently.
Yeah.
So that led me down this sort of path, and then just let's not go too deep into it. Let's keep it general. But basically, we don't pick our parents, so therefore we don't pick where we were born and the environment that we grew up in, and our genetics, and all of that guides us towards the direction we're going. So, for instance, Exiled Hope, she didn't choose to grow up in that dystopian, futuristic fantasy world with a corrupt government. And I'm sure that there's some sort of personal things that she has to deal with that she also didn't choose. But then in order to be a hero, she does have to choose to overcome those things that she was born into.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I always think it's not, to keep it simple, I say I don't believe in free will, but my actual position is I think some people have more free will than others.
I think in a way you choose how much free will you have. Like you can choose to submit to your circumstances, or you can choose the hard path and choose to make something different of yourself. And that's kind of what Apocrypha is about, because the main character in that album, he was born into this position of power, but he's not really sure what to do with it. And he's being told that he needs to use his power in one way, but he's not sure if that's the right way to use it. And he wrestles with who he is and how he can utilize the power that he's given for good.
And that's interesting too, because when we think about the sort of you can't choose your parents, you can't choose your environment portion of free will, often what comes to mind is like poor, disadvantaged people. And also the other side of that coin is somebody that's born like a trust fund kid. They didn't choose that either. Yeah. And all of the baggage that comes along with that. And, you know, that biblical saying that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to go to heaven. You know, it's like some people don't have the ability financially and free time wise to really act a fool. So it's not that they're choosing not to act a fool. They're not capable. Meanwhile, you've got this trust fund kid who could just party hardy if they want to, and get away with all sorts of things thanks to their privilege. So it's actually much more difficult for them to resist that temptation. And that must be sort of where your character that was born into a privileged position and is in the government must be dealing with that as well.
Yeah, that's exactly the point of the story, I would say. You know, it's about recognizing the things that you have and maybe even the things that you don't have, and then choosing yourself what to do with them instead of listening to what other people in your life are telling you that you need to do, or listening to, you know, everyone saying, okay, this is who you are, this is your only choice, you were born into this is the only thing you can choose. And it's like, well, I mean, the world is your oyster, and there are a lot of different things that you can choose in life. You know, you can't choose your parents, you can't choose the circumstances that you were born into, but there are choices that you can make in order to change your situation.
I really think that it's the way that we look at that reality that we don't choose how we were born that kind of can determine which direction of morality you're going to take. So let's take this privileged person, for instance. If they view that privilege of being born in that position as ordained by God or as being chosen or, you know, birthright, if you view the world from that sort of direction, then it can allow for a lot of justifications for a lot of different behaviors. Whereas if you're like me and you view it as just pure luck, that you know, like I have achieved my dream. I live in a cabin in the woods, and I know that a lot of it was luck. And people will say, well, you worked hard, you made good choices. Like, yes, but I was also capable of doing that. And I lucked out meeting the wife that I met and, you know, being compatible and all sorts of things. There's certain things that could have went way wrong that I just got lucky. They didn't go wrong. You know, I avoided jail a few times when I was a teenager, just all sorts of different things, you know. So there's a lot of luck involved. And when I look at it as, well, I'm just lucky, well, then that doesn't really allow me to take all the credit. And then I feel a bit of responsibility in my position.
Yeah, and it doesn't really allow you to take ownership of your position, because luck can be very empowering or it can be very limiting. And when you limit yourself to thinking, oh, my accomplishments are all just based on luck, then that can devalue the small steps that maybe you didn't know that you were taking that led you into a certain position and that led you in a certain direction that took you to where you are now, just step by little step. Like, I was thinking about this the other day. I was like, you know, I was thinking about how annoying it is to have to go to class and to finish out this one last semester of law school before I graduate. And I was thinking, well, actually, I'm very lucky to be here. It took a lot of work, and it feels like in a way, everything that I've done from, high school up until now must have incrementally led me to this position that I'm in now. But it's kind of a hard thing to deal with, because you don't really know how much of it was luck and how much of it was intentional based on the actions that you took when you're looking back at it and when you're not really in the thick of it.
Yeah, yeah. And we want to be proud too. So because we do work hard,
Yeah.
but I'm capable of working hard. So I have to be thankful for that,
Yeah.
It's very mind bending. And I think that's why I'm so obsessed with the subject.
Yeah, absolutely. It is something that I think about a lot, and of course, it's a prominent theme in my music.
Yeah. And I think that's why hero stories are so important.
Yeah,
It's easy to look at fantasy and sci-fi and just fiction in general as, just stories and entertainment. But there's a reason why these stories are so big and popular. It's because they inspire us, and that, okay, I'm a Star Wars fan. So in the grand scheme of things, Star Wars really has not done very much for my life outside of entertainment. But just that little bit of inspiration is also immeasurable, unquantifiable as far as influencing all the little decisions along the way.
absolutely. I've been telling everyone about this, but I watched this video on YouTube fairly recently. It was called "This Is Why You're Still Haunted" by Lord of the Rings, and they're basically talking about everything that you just said. Like, we need fantasy in our lives in order to motivate us to aspire to something higher and to connect us to the world that we have the capability to create, and to show us that, hey, this is what you can do when you live to your highest potential and when you live in alignment with your values and with your virtues.
Yeah. And you have to be able, in order to feel fulfilled in what you're doing, and you have to be able to look in the mirror and, of course I'm self-critical. I'm my own worst critic, but also I can look in the mirror and go, okay, you're doing all right.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it takes more effort. It takes more effort some days than others, but yeah,
Absolutely.
you got it. You got to give yourself credit where credit is due. You worked for this, and you can't just say, "Oh, I was lucky to get into this position." Like, no, you did take some steps in your life in order to get here, and there are there are other choices that you could have made that would have led you down a different path, but ultimately you made the choices that you did, and that's why you're here.
Well, you've definitely made a lot of small choices that have stacked up on top of each other. And it's kind of crazy to think about you doing something so tedious as this large, grand, high fantasy, blackened power metal album while you're going to law school and amongst other pursuits as well. Again, you have that capability of being consistent and working hard, and it's gonna show. Everybody will hear Apocrypha on April 11th.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.